This is a footprint in time. You know, it's something that will never happen again.
The Mitchell Engine House and Repair Shop is a testament to the history and heritage of Minnesota. The 1906 roundhouse, just north of Hibbing, was a vital hub in mining and railroad operations up through World War II. It is one of the state's most endangered historic places.
This building is the last vestige of our heritage on the Iron Range. They're all gone.
Dave Aho dreams of leveraging the legacy of the past to inspire another generation of workers with skills, music, art, and poetry.
This is a testament probably to the energy and the abilities of the people that came here.
This is a place that needs to be preserved, and it's a story that needs to be heard.
So it becomes a question of what are we going to value?
Explore the human story of mining and railroads and its lost history in Last Call for the Mitchell Yards.
Funding for the playlist is provided by the citizens of Minnesota through the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.
Sometimes I think of myself as kind of a nature photographer, just in a disconnected sense. You know, some nature photographers like to take pictures of trees or cool moss or something like that. I do that too, but it's usually moss like this, moss that's coming out from the concrete, or trees that are growing out of a roof. It's a different way to celebrate nature. It's kind of the triumph of nature over man. And in a place that's so unapologetically inorganic. This is a brick block structure, and inside of the brick block structure there are other blocks. Everything is very harsh, everything is very utilitarian. But I like that about it. I like that about that you can go to this place that's so, in a design sense, strict. It's discreet, and you can find signs of life all the time. Richard Glumac, May 16th, 1944, Hibbing, Minnesota. 1944, 1943, 1943. All different guys. Well, I can tell exactly where people spent their time when they weren't working, right? Because this is where they stood. I know because these said so, right? That's not what they intended when they scrawled, you know, one of them actually says like Red Ore in it. Like he said, I live in Red Ore. Like, his name, Red Ore, this is the year that I'm standing in this spot. Like, he didn't think that some nerd would come by later and say, oh, I can tell that somebody stood here in this year and that he lived over there in a town that's now erased from the surface of the earth. That kind of stuff gets me really excited. And that's it. I find that I first came here because the outside was beautiful, especially the doors. I just love those giant doors. But this is really nice. I love it. I'm kind of a boiler fetishist though. I have like my favorite boilers. It's cracked on the side, so it's kind of like, it looks like it's kind of fighting to get out. And also it's the only thing here that really says the name of the railroad. When I took the picture of the boiler, I had to do it at night because you can't see the letters on top of the boiler in just daylight. We had to come in with lights. This is a footprint in time. You know, it's something that will never happen again. So when I come here to document something like this, especially something as endangered as this, you know, so we look up, wishing that we brought our hard hats maybe sometimes, we think, well, I think at least this is our last chance. I've been in like probably 40 or 50 roundhouses. This is my thing, lost history, places that are decaying. This is totally unique. So it becomes a question of what are we going to value, right? And when I look to take pictures somewhere, I value the story, I value the uniqueness, I value what different things that it does. The result is a culmination of stories, and in my case, I have art to go along with it, right? So just like the building draws you in, because the building is it's a very interesting building to look at, right? I reel people in by saying, here are my favorite parts about this place. Here are my takeaways from this unique little, you know, this building that couldn't exist any other place, any other way, built in any other time. And I say, okay, now that I have your attention, let me tell you some cool stories.
This boiler ran 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And it was fed by hand, just like the steam locomotives were, by shoveling coal that came down this chute right here. But more importantly, this is where they recoaled the locomotives. Locomotives would come right next to this building right here, and that's where they get their coal. I would love to have been here to see that. It was a pretty magnificent looking place. My name is Dave Aho, and we are at the Mitchell Engine House at Mitchell Yards, adjacent to Hibbing. I've owned this property for 7 years now, and this is my life, getting this building restored. We're in the main locomotive shop, and the end of this structure is 235 feet down the line from here. As you can see, 3 sets of railroad tracks. A little bit hard to see, but you can see roughly where they are. In the receiving, you can see those sort of start of a pyramid kind of a shape. They're pushed out of the way right now. Those were smoke chutes. Roof jacks is what they call them. And when you count them up, you can see that they could get 3 locomotives in on each set of tracks, so they could have 9 in here at any one time. This structure was built 5 years after U.S. Steel was formed. And Andrew Carnegie was a part of that, one of the original founders. At the same time, U.S. Steel owned the Duluth and Iron Range Railroad, and they kept them separate. Until '38, they merged the two, and it became then the Duluth, Wasabi, and Iron Range, the DM&IR. This facility played a major role for this country in World War II in particular, because of the massive amounts of steel that we needed to build Liberty ships and tanks and so forth. And 80% of the iron ore used to make that steel came from the whole Rust pit and surrounding mines. It meant that they had to ship an awful lot of ore. When the workers here got these cars started, the train would leave. I've heard reports and read reports that if you sat on the top of the hill at Proctor during that time period, you'd watch a loaded train go by every 15 minutes. Now, when you think about what it takes to do that, just to get the train ready, they had to get the coal ashes out, recoal them, rewater them, fix anything that went wrong, and pump them out 65 train loads a day. Are you kidding me? I don't know how they did it. Unbelievable. Nothing high tech either. It was all just manual labor. So the very good people that worked here did make a contribution, for sure.
sketch. In 1916, in Boabik during the strike, an accident happened when the company's guards visited the house of Philip Masanovich. Some said it was over a drink, but that's not what others think. A blind pig was implicated, a family who took in a boarder. A grudge unsettled them, a strike at fever pitch. It began underground, where the intestinal rivers wound through mineral maps. It began an extraction of the geomagnetic fields in the Canadian Shield, with the mining of ores taken for steel, paving the continent with bridges and tracks. It began in locations, in mines where money drained from the pockets and the hires carried dynamite caps. It began with fires burning behind clouds of smoke, the false night among the silhouettes, filters turning yellow and wet. Some coughed in unison and spoke in foreign tongues, in code. Some were liars, thick ores and clay and blood mix and crush wounds in miner's lung. It began in thin pay envelopes. A bullet found its way out of the gun, but the aim was wrong. One man was gone. There were some who broke the rules, and there were stools. Women couldn't remove the stains. They buried the remains, but the work went on. A woman and infant were detained in the local jail. Wobblies on another road miles away were arrested for inciting to riot and put on trial. Some votes were lost, and some were won. 100 years went by.
So your latest book is called Night Train and Red Dust.
Yes.
And set around this environment.
I've written stories that relate to many of the people that were here at the turn of the century, and my grandparents and some of my own history.
What was the spark?
I wanted to write about my grandparents when they came here from Finland, and I didn't find a whole lot of material about my grandmother. So I started to do research about the community that she came into. It was very diverse. I had read that there were about 40 languages that were spoken in this area. I grew up south of Boabik, and in the year 1900, they had 11 underground mines. There were so many difficulties in mining at that time. It was very unsafe, and people were frequently injured or killed in the operations. Half the beds in the hospital were always from miners, and there were crush wounds, being hit by a train, falling from ladders. Also, the other concerns that they had listed at that time were typhoid, venereal disease, and gunshots. So it was a wild place.
As a poet, how did you decide kind of what language, what voice to use in these?
I worked at Mintac in college one summer when I was in college. My sister worked for LTV. She was a train engineer. She retired from there, so she had a career in mining. My aunts had worked in the iron mines during World War II. I could hear their voices. You know, the voice that I used here, I think, was the voice that I heard when I was growing up. Oliver Mine, World War II. An all-female crew in the pit on day shift, pickaxe, shovel, crowbar. They wear work boots, men's bib overalls, beneath plaid shirts, thermal underwear, and bras stained with iron ore. They tie their heads with triangle scarves. They don't mind getting dirty working in the mine while the men are off to war. In the pocket, a flask, a pack of cigarettes, a navy handkerchief, lunch boxes, gray as artillery. No heels to wobble after the whistle blows when they put a nickel in the jukebox in neon glow, dance to a love song, fingernails stained by toil. Ton after ton loaded on rails. They went deeper after the dynamite with shovels bent to the task and took out the very ground they were standing on.
Is there a characteristic that defines the kind of woman who could survive here?
They were people who had a great deal of resilience and a great deal of mission to help other people, and a strong sense of community, and very independent.
So as a poet, tell me your journey. When did you say writing is for me?
Oh, okay. Well, I started writing poetry when I was a teenager, actually, in school. And in college, I always loved to read, and I loved literature. But it took me a long time to realize that my voice and my strength as a writer comes from my place in the world, my landscape. And by using the language and the experience of people here, I think has really made the voice in this book strong.
What is your impression of this place that we're standing? 1906,
Well,
Mitchell Yard.
This is a testament, probably, to the energy and the abilities of the people that came here, that were able to move so many million, tons of ore out of this one small roundhouse during World War I and World War II. My geology. I excavate these words from a vein of iron, from stones broken beneath old growth, from the open pit lit by dynamite, by men whose lives are punctuated by midnights, who drive new cars to the plant, to the crusher and agglomerator, and later suffer mesothelioma. I drive in acid rain, my compass gone awry over protozoic layers with four-wheel drive. These words are test drills and core samples from the boundary waters. These words are wrung from the whistles and wheels that turn. These words have never been projected into boardrooms. I have yet to wield these powers or capitalize. I have yet to see the returns. I claim my words from the broken English, damaged roots, finished syntax, and geomagnetic fields, from eminent domain and small print, unreadable clauses. I find my vowels from labor contracts and mine dumps, factories, and invisible contamination. My words in the runoff and open streams oxidize, form like tree rings in industrial circles, heat in the smelters, pour like lava into steel, form these rails that carry the trains, these trains that carry this freight.
The universe is telling me this is what I need to do. We already have been listed on the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota's list of 10 most endangered historical places in Minnesota. This will hopefully be restored at some point, as it was when it was built to work. As this was the machine shop, it will be the machine shop again. Just being in this building will teach you some things about work ethic, craftsmanship, sticking with it, sometimes in the face of incredible odds. I think of this in terms of this is community property. I'm just the caretaker. That's the way I look at it.
Paul Seeba is a musician with Iron Range roots, and he's putting the Mitchell Yards on the map. So tell me the song Mitchell Yards. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, the song, I guess I came up with the idea by attending an event by the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota. And this was a couple years back. It was an intention to raise awareness of buildings like this that have these historical narratives behind them that are really important and people need to know about. I read about the bio of Mitchell Yards and it struck me because I grew up in Hibbing and it just moved me, and I just decided to write the song. It's a little bit fiction because there's a story that never really happened about a 9-year-old kid, and I try to weave that into the history of World War II and connect it to the history of Mitchell Yards and the fact that it's a railroad switching station and it had such significance during that important time in our country's history. So trying to put it all together, I guess we call it historical fiction. I'm a social studies teacher, so I can connect pretty easy to a place like this. I think it's important to connect the fact that World War II was won, and perhaps it's a bit overstatement to say that Mitchell Yards did it, but it certainly helped contribute to the war effort, and I think that's important to be reminded of that from time to time.
Well, he's 9 years old and never been told, never pull a firearm just for fun. Switchman will say, hey, Jimmy Bray, we need an engineer with a BB gun. When Jimmy asks why, Switchman replies, everybody gone to fight in D-Day. Switchman says, just forget your mess, steal a locomotive in the right way. He said, look at all the fast trains, pulling all the cars, heading on down to the Mitchell Yards. Look at all the fast trains, pulling all the ore, heading on down to the World War. And I'll ride that train, and ride that train. Train to Mitchell Yards. Well, it's kind of a thriller listening to Roger Miller and a little kid driving a train so absurd. Did a big flow chart faster than a go-kart, tracing that chain just a buffalo herd. Battalion of 4th grade engineers, and the word had spread even Nazis had said it's a railroad squadron of buccaneers. It says look at all the fast trains pulling all the cars, heading on down to the Mitchell Yards. Look at all the fast trains pulling all the ore, heading on down to the World War. And I'll ride that train. Gonna ride that train. Mitchell Yards, to the Mitchell Yards, to the Mitchell Yards. Switchman said, Jimmy got to get to bed. Tomorrow's the night of the starlight dance. And in the middle of the night, Jimmy flicks on a light. They all chase off to liberate friends. They say, look at all the fast trains pulling all the cars, heading on down to the Mitchell Yards. Look at all the fast trains pulling all the ore, heading on down to the World War. We said, look at all the fast trains pulling all the cars, heading on down to the Mitchell Yards. Look at all the fast trains pulling all the ore.
I like two things about this space. I like the hoods because that says that this is a steam shop. That's why there aren't trains here now. Once they had diesel trains, they just went right by.
This is a place that needs to be preserved, and it's a story that needs to be heard.
There are some really important stories that have been forgotten.
And the stories are of the people that used to live around here, people that used to work here. The range was the heart of Minnesota. We are a mining state. That's our culture, right? And this is part of that story. And the cool story is, well, the modern story is what Dave's trying to do to the place.
This building is the last vestige of our heritage on the Iron Range. They're all gone. It's our history from 100 years ago.
Funding for the playlist is provided by the citizens of Minnesota through the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.